Welcome to our channel, where we bring you the most gripping stories of love, betrayal, and redemption. Today, we uncover Elena's heart-wrenching journey as she battles the devastating betrayal of her husband Mark and the manipulative return of his ex, Sophia. It's a tale of shattered trust, fierce loyalty, and the fight to protect her family. Join us as we dive into this emotional roller coaster that will leave you torn between fury and anticipation. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that will keep you hooked. It was the summer of 2018, in the quiet suburbs of Crestwood Heights, a picturesque neighborhood where the lawns were perfectly trimmed, and every house looked like it had stepped straight out of a magazine. Life here seemed simple, almost too perfect, but as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. And for Elena Myers, this couldn't be truer. Elena was the kind of woman you'd notice immediately, but not because she was flashy or loud. No, her presence was quiet but magnetic. At 35, she was beautiful in an understated way. Shoulder-length auburn hair, soft freckles across her cheeks, and a smile that could light up any room, though lately, it felt dimmer. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, balancing the demands of her job with the needs of her family. If you saw her around town, you'd probably think, there's a woman who has it all together, but Elena knew better. Her husband, Mark Myers, was a man who prided himself on being the provider. He had worked his way up the corporate ladder to a well-paying executive position in a real estate firm. Mark was charming, with a natural charisma that could win over anyone in the room. But at home, things were different. Over the years, his attention had shifted from Elena to his career, or maybe to something else entirely. And then there was Liam, their 8-year-old son who was the glue holding their family together. With his boundless curiosity and wide grin, he was the one thing that made Elena feel like her world hadn't completely fallen apart. But before we dive deeper into their story, let me ask, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, because this tale is about to get intense, and you'll want to be part of the conversation. Our story begins on a warm June morning. The sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Elena stood at the counter, carefully packing Liam's lunch for school. The soft hum of the coffee machine filled the room, blending with the faint sound of cartoons playing in the living room. It should have been a scene of domestic bliss, but if you looked closer, you'd see the tension beneath the surface. Mark entered the kitchen, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his tie perfectly knotted. He poured himself a cup of coffee without so much as a glance at Elena. "I'm going to be home late tonight," he said matter-of-factly, scrolling through his phone. Elena didn't look up. "Work again?" Mark hesitated, just for a second, before nodding. "Yeah, we've got a client meeting that might run late." There it was, that familiar pang in her chest. It wasn't the words themselves, but the way he said them, devoid of warmth or consideration. She forced a smile. "All right, just don't forget Liam's recital tomorrow. He's been practicing for weeks." Mark finally looked up, his expression softening ever so slightly. "Of course I'll be there," he said. But there was something unconvincing in his tone. As Mark left for work, Elena's gaze lingered on the empty doorway. She had a nagging feeling, one she couldn't quite put into words. But it was there. A small voice whispering that something wasn't right. Later that morning, Elena met her best friend Kara at their favorite cafe. Kara was the polar opposite of Elena, bold, outspoken, and fiercely protective of the people she cared about. She had been Elena's confidant for years, and today was no exception. "So how's Mark?" Kara asked, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. Elena hesitated, stirring her latte. "He's busy, as usual, always something with work." Kara raised an eyebrow. "And you're buying that?" Elena sighed. "I don't know, Kara. Maybe I'm overthinking it. He's been distant, sure, but he's always been a workaholic." Kara leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Elena, you're not overthinking. You're underthinking. You deserve more than this ghost of a marriage." Elena's chest tightened at Kara's words. She wanted to protest, to defend Mark, but deep down, she knew Kara was right. The cracks in their relationship had been there for years, but she had ignored them, hoping they'd somehow disappear. That evening, after putting Liam to bed, Elena found herself alone in the living room. Mark still wasn't home, and it was nearing midnight. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over the call button, but something stopped her. Instead, she opened her messages, scrolling back through their recent conversations. The texts were brief, practical, discussions about schedules, bills, and Liam. There wasn't a single message that felt personal or affectionate. It was like they were business partners rather than a married couple. Elena shook her head, trying to push away the doubts creeping in, but then her phone buzzed and her heart jumped. It was a notification from their shared calendar. Mark had added a meeting titled Dinner with Client. Dinner. He hadn't mentioned dinner. Elena stared at the screen, a knot forming in her stomach. For the first time, the little voice in her head wasn't so little anymore. It was screaming, demanding answers. The next morning, Elena woke up with a sense of determination. She wasn't the type to snoop. It went against everything she believed in. But something inside her told her she needed to know the truth. While Mark was in the shower, she picked up his phone from the nightstand. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it, knowing his passcode from years ago. She told herself it was just to check his messages, to put her mind at ease. But what she found only confirmed her worst fears. There were texts from an unknown number, marked with a name she didn't recognize. Sophia. The messages were casual but intimate in a way that sent chills down her spine. Sophia. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about it. Mark. Me neither. Can't wait to see you again. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded as she stared at the screen, the words blurring in front of her eyes. She felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. Mark emerged from the shower, a towel draped over his shoulders, humming to himself. Elena quickly locked his phone and set it back down, her hands still trembling. She forced herself to act normal, but every fiber of her being wanted to scream. At breakfast, she watched him carefully, studying every word, every glance, every movement. Was this the man she had fallen in love with, or had he always been someone else entirely? For now, Elena decided to keep what she had discovered to herself. She needed time to process, to figure out her next move. But one thing was clear: the life she thought she knew was about to change forever. Here's the continuation of the cheating story script, focusing on rising conflict, character development, and plot progression. The next morning dawned with an eerie calm, but for Elena, it was anything but peaceful. She moved through her morning routine like a ghost, her mind racing with questions. Who was Sophia? How long had this been going on? And, most haunting of all, why? Mark, oblivious to her inner turmoil, sipped his coffee at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone. His carefree demeanor felt like a slap in the face. Elena studied him, looking for cracks in his facade, but he was unreadable, the same composed man she had married, or thought she had. Liam, Mark called out as their son came bounding into the room. Hurry up, buddy. We don't want to be late for school. Elena forced a smile, ruffling Liam's hair as he grabbed a piece of toast. Don't forget your recital tonight, she reminded, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Mark nodded, his tone breezy. I'll be there, wouldn't miss it for the world. As she watched him leave, the weight of his words hit her like a ton of bricks. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he meant it. But after what she had seen, everything felt like a lie. After dropping Liam off at school, Elena found herself parked outside a coffee shop, her fingers drumming against the steering wheel. She had no plan, no roadmap for what to do next, but she knew one thing: she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She pulled out her phone and typed the name Sophia into the search bar, hoping for a clue, a lead. Anything a LinkedIn profile popped up first. A polished professional photo of a woman in her early 30s with sleek dark hair and an air of confidence. Sophia worked in marketing at Mark's company. Elena's stomach churned as she stared at the screen. Suddenly, the late nights, the client dinners, and the distant looks all clicked into place. It wasn't work keeping Mark away. It was her. Later that afternoon, Elena met Kara at the cafe again, her heart pounding as she slid into the seat across from her friend. She hadn't told anyone yet, not a soul, but the weight of her discovery was too much to bear alone. "I need to talk to you," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kara set down her latte, her eyes narrowing. "This sounds serious. What's going on?" Elena hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of a napkin. "I think Mark is having an affair." Kara's expression shifted from concern to outrage in a split second. "What are you serious? What makes you think that?" Elena pulled out her phone, showing Kara the texts she had found. As Kara read them, her jaw clenched, her fingers gripping the phone like she might throw it across the room. "That son of a—" Kara stopped herself, lowering her voice. "Elena, this is not okay. You need to confront him." Elena shook her head. "I can't. Not yet. I need to figure out what I want to do first." Kara reached across the table, squeezing her friend's hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm here, but promise me you won't let him get away with this." That evening, Mark arrived home just as Elena was finishing dinner. He greeted Liam with a warm smile, but when he turned to Elena, his expression was guarded. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone casual. Elena nodded, her face a mask of calm. "Fine dinner's ready." They sat down as a family, the clinking of silverware filling the silence. Elena couldn't stop watching him, couldn't stop wondering how he could sit there so calmly when her world was unraveling. After Liam went to bed, Elena decided to test the waters. "How was your day?" she asked, keeping her voice light. Mark didn't look up from his plate. "Busy, as usual. Meetings back to back." "And dinner? Did you go out with anyone from the office?" Mark hesitated, just for a moment, but it was enough to make Elena's pulse quicken. "Yeah," he said finally. "Just a quick bite with a client." Elena forced a smile, nodding as if nothing was wrong, but inside, her suspicions grew stronger. He was lying. She could feel it. The next morning, Elena woke up with a sense of clarity. She couldn't live like this, trapped in a web of doubt and deception. If Mark wouldn't give her the truth, she would have to find it herself. After dropping Liam at school, she drove to Mark's office, her heart pounding as she parked across the street. She felt like a character in a bad movie, but desperation had taken hold. From her vantage point, she could see the front entrance clearly. An hour passed, then two, and just as she was about to give up, the doors swung open. Mark stepped out, his arm brushing against Sophia's as they walked side by side. They were laughing, their connection unmistakable. Elena's breath caught in her throat. There it was, confirmation of what she had feared all along. But instead of feeling relief at finally knowing the truth, she felt a wave of grief so intense it nearly knocked her breath away. That evening, Elena waited until Liam was asleep before confronting Mark. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as he walked into the living room. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm. Mark froze, his expression wary. "What's going on?" Elena took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of strength she had. "I know about Sophia." For a moment, the room was so silent she could hear her own heartbeat. Then, Mark's face crumpled, and he sank into the chair across from her. "Elena, I can explain." "No," she cut him off, her voice shaking. "I don't want excuses, I want the truth. How long has this been going on?" Mark rubbed his hands over his face, his shoulders slumping. "It's not what you think, she's just a friend." Elena laughed bitterly. "A friend who sends you texts about how amazing last night was? Do you think I'm an idiot?" Mark's silence spoke volumes, and in that moment, Elena felt the full weight of his betrayal. The man she had built her life with had not only lied to her, but had shattered the trust she thought was unbreakable. After their confrontation, Mark moved into the guest room, and the house became a tense battleground. Elena threw herself into her work and focused on Liam, determined to shield him from the chaos. But at night, when the house was quiet, the pain crept in. She replayed their marriage in her mind, questioning everything. How had she not seen the signs? And could she ever forgive him? As days turned into weeks, Elena began to rebuild herself piece by piece. She leaned on Kara, poured her energy into her designs, and started to rediscover the woman she had been before Mark's betrayal. And for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but she was determined to move forward, for herself and for Liam. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. If you're enjoying this story, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means the world to me. Mark's move to the guest room was supposed to create space, a buffer to give Elena time to think and Mark a chance to reflect. Instead, it turned their home into a minefield. Every interaction was fraught with tension, every silence heavier than the last. Liam, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing, remained the only bright spot in their lives. Elena found herself watching Mark more closely than ever. He was subdued, no longer the confident, carefree man who used to breeze in and out of their lives. His attempts to repair the damage, small gestures like bringing her coffee in the morning or asking about her day, felt hollow. She couldn't shake the memory of the texts or the image of him with Sophia. One evening, as Mark sat at the dining table staring blankly at his laptop, Elena approached, her heart pounding. "What are you going to do about this?" she asked, her voice low but firm. Mark looked up, startled. "About what?" "About us. About this mess you've created. Are you going to fight for this family? Or are you just going to sit there and wait for me to fix everything?" Mark's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she saw the cracks in his facade. "I don't know what to do, Elena," he admitted. "I've messed up, I know that, but I don't know how to make it right." Elena stared at him, her emotions warring between anger and pity. "Figure it out, Mark, because I can't carry this alone." The next day, Elena did something she never thought she'd have the courage to do. She confronted Sophia. It wasn't planned. She had dropped Liam off at soccer practice and was on her way home when she spotted Sophia walking out of a cafe. Before she could second-guess herself, Elena parked the car and marched inside. "Excuse me," Elena said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Sophia, isn't it?" Sophia turned, her polished smile faltering as she recognized Elena. "Yes, and you are?" "Elena Myers," she said, extending a hand. "Mark's wife." Sophia's face paled, her composure slipping. I didn't realize—" "You didn't realize he had a wife?" Elena interrupted, her voice sharp. "Because that seems like a pretty important detail." Sophia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Elena took a step closer, her anger bubbling to the surface. "I'm not here to scream or cause a scene, I just want to know one thing. Did you ever think about what you were doing, about how this might destroy my family?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, Elena felt a pang of guilt. But then she remembered the texts, the lies, and the pain, and the guilt evaporated. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen. We got too close." Elena laughed bitterly. "Too close? That's your excuse?" Sophia looked down, unable to meet Elena's gaze. "I'm sorry." Elena took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Just stay away from my family." She turned and walked out, her head held high, but as soon as she got to her car, she broke down in tears. Confronting Sophia hadn't brought the closure she had hoped for. It had only deepened her sense of betrayal. That evening, Elena's confrontation with Sophia hung in the air between her and Mark. She hadn't told him about it yet, but the weight of the encounter made her anger sharper, her words colder. Mark noticed after dinner. He followed her into the living room, his expression tentative. "Can we talk?" Elena crossed her arms, leaning against the armrest of the couch. "What is there to talk about, Mark? You made your choices. Mark hesitated, running a hand through his hair. I know I screwed up, but I'm trying, Elena. I'm trying to fix this. She let out a hollow laugh. Fix it? How, by moving into the guest room and avoiding me by pretending everything's fine when it's clearly not? I don't know what else to do, he snapped, his voice rising. I've apologized. I've told you I regret everything. What more do you want from me? I want the truth, she shouted, the words exploding out of her. The whole truth. Mark, not just bits and pieces to make yourself look better. Mark froze, his eyes wide. For a moment, it seemed like he might say something, but then he turned away, his silence speaking louder than words. The next morning, Elena woke up with a sense of clarity. She couldn't live in limbo any longer. If Mark couldn't give her the truth, she would find it herself. While Mark was at work, Elena combed through their shared computer. At first, there was nothing out of the ordinary. Spreadsheets, emails, family photos, but then she found a hidden folder labeled Personal. Her heart pounded as she clicked on it. Inside were dozens of photos, messages, and files that confirmed her worst fears. Mark and Sophia hadn't just been close. They had been in a full-blown affair for months. The evidence was overwhelming, and as she read through it, her hands shook with rage. By the time Mark came home that evening, Elena was ready. She confronted him in the living room, holding up the printouts she had made. Care to explain this? Mark's face turned ghostly pale as he stared at the papers. Elena, just don't, she interrupted, her voice trembling with anger. I gave you every chance to come clean, and you lied over and over again. How could you do this to me, to Liam? Mark sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. I don't have an excuse, he said quietly. I was stupid and selfish, and I thought I could get away with it. Elena laughed bitterly. Well, congratulations, Mark. You didn't. For the next few days, the house was eerily silent. Mark stayed out of Elena's way, but the tension was unbearable. Liam, sensing the shift in the air, began asking questions. Mom, is everything okay? He asked one night as Elena tucked him into bed. Elena forced a smile, brushing a hand through his hair. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about it. But as she closed his door, her smile crumbled. Nothing was fine, and she had no idea how to fix it. Elena knew she couldn't stay in this limbo forever. She started seeing a therapist, someone to help her sort through the mess of emotions she was drowning in. It wasn't easy, but slowly, she began to find clarity. Mark, too, made an effort. He started attending counseling, both alone and with Elena. He apologized again and again, but Elena wasn't ready to forgive him. She didn't know if she ever would. What she did know was that she couldn't let this define her. She threw herself into her work, took up yoga, and spent as much time as possible with Liam. Slowly, she began to rebuild her sense of self. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel if this story has you hooked. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Days stretched into weeks, but the tension in the house was unbearable. Elena was at her wits' end, the once familiar walls now suffocating her. Mark's attempts to reconcile were becoming more frequent and desperate, yet each effort only seemed to widen the chasm between them. And then, one fateful evening, the simmering tension boiled over. It started innocently enough, another tense dinner, where every bite of food felt like swallowing shards of glass. Liam's cheerful chatter filled the silence, oblivious to the undercurrent of hostility between his parents. But when Liam asked, Mom, can we all go to the park tomorrow like we used to? Elena froze. Mark jumped at the chance. That's a great idea, buddy. No, Elena interrupted, her voice sharper than intended. We're not pretending everything's fine when it's not. Mark's face fell, and Liam's smile faded. What's wrong? Liam asked, his wide eyes darting between his parents. Nothing, sweetheart, Elena said, forcing a smile. Finish your dinner. But the damage was done. After Liam went to bed, the confrontation they'd both been avoiding finally erupted. You couldn't hold it together for him? Mark snapped, slamming his glass down on the counter. Elena whirled around, her voice shaking with anger. Hold it together. For what to play happy family while you lie to my face? I'm trying, Elena, Mark shouted. I'm doing everything I can to fix this, but you won't even meet me halfway. Fix this? Elena's voice cracked, her fury giving way to the deep hurt she had buried. You can't fix this, Mark. You broke it. You broke us. Mark's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. I know I did, he said quietly. But I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family. Elena stared at him, her chest heaving with emotion. For the first time, she saw the raw vulnerability in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Just when Elena thought things couldn't get worse, Sophia re-entered the picture. This time, with a vengeance. A text message from an unknown number lit up Elena's phone one evening. We need to talk. Her stomach turned. She knew who it was before she even opened the message. Sophia wasn't content to fade into the background. She wanted to be heard. Against her better judgment, Elena agreed to meet her. They met at a park on the edge of town, far from prying eyes. Sophia arrived looking poised and unbothered, her confidence grating against Elena's already frayed nerves. What do you want? Elena demanded, crossing her arms. I think you deserve to know the truth, Sophia said, her voice calm but firm. Mark told you it's over, didn't he? It is over, Elena snapped. And you're not part of this family. Sophia smirked, leaning in slightly. Maybe not, but you should know that Mark wasn't honest with you. He didn't just cheat once. It wasn't some fleeting mistake. He came back to me more than once because what we had was real. Elena's vision blurred with rage, but she refused to give Sophia the satisfaction of a reaction. You think this is helping you? She said through gritted teeth. You're nothing but a cheap distraction, and that's all you'll ever be. Sophia's expression faltered for a moment, but she recovered quickly. Believe what you want, but deep down, you know I'm right. He's only staying because of guilt, not love. Elena walked away, her hands shaking. Sophia's words echoed in her mind, planting seeds of doubt she couldn't shake. Fueled by Sophia's taunts, Elena decided she needed more answers. She spent hours poring over old bank statements, phone records, and emails, searching for the missing pieces of the puzzle. And then she found it. A series of unexplained withdrawals and hotel bookings that stretched back months. The reality of Mark's betrayal hit her like a tidal wave. It wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was calculated, deliberate, and it wasn't just Sophia, there were others. When Mark came home that evening, Elena was waiting for him in the living room, the evidence spread out on the coffee table. Explain this, she demanded, her voice icy. Mark's face drained of color as he took in the documents. Elena, Don't lie to me, she cut him off. I want the truth, all of it. Mark sank into the chair across from her, his head in his hands. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said, his voice barely audible. I didn't mean for it to happen. You didn't mean for what to happen? Elena pressed, her voice rising. For me to find out, for our marriage to fall apart? Mark looked up, tears streaming down his face. I didn't mean to hurt you, I was selfish, and I let things spiral out of control, but I swear, Elena, it didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? Elena laughed bitterly, gesturing to the papers. This wasn't a mistake, Mark. This was a choice over and over again. Elena's anger burned hot, but beneath it was a deep sadness that threatened to consume her. For days, she avoided Mark, pouring herself into work and spending as much time as possible with Liam. But the weight of the situation was impossible to escape. Finally, Mark confronted her. We can't keep living like this, he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Tell me what I need to do to make this right. Elena met his gaze, her own eyes filled with tears. You want to make this right? Then leave. Mark's face crumpled, but he nodded. If that's what you want. It's not what I want, Elena said, her voice breaking. It's what I need. Mark packed his things that night. Moving into a small apartment across town, Liam was devastated. But Elena knew it was the right decision. She needed time to heal, to figure out who she was without Mark. In the weeks that followed, Elena found herself rediscovering her strength. She threw herself into her work, started going to therapy, and leaned on Kara for support. Slowly but surely, she began to rebuild her life. Mark, too, seemed to be working on himself. He continued counseling, attended every one of Liam's soccer games, and respected Elena's boundaries. For the first time in years, he seemed genuinely committed to change. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. If you're enjoying this gripping story, your support means everything to me. As weeks turned into months, Elena found herself in a fragile balance. Her days were filled with moments of quiet determination as she worked to rebuild her life. Mark's absence was both a relief and a void, one that Liam noticed more keenly than she did. The evenings, however, were the hardest. Liam would ask questions Elena couldn't answer. Questions like, "Why can't Dad come back home?" Or, "Don't you love him anymore?" Her attempts to shield her son from the truth often felt like walking a tightrope. Meanwhile, Mark wasn't sitting idly by. His weekly therapy sessions began to shift his perspective, and he started to understand the depth of his betrayal. Determined to prove his worth, he made a point of being present for Liam. Every soccer game, every school meeting, Mark was there, quietly rebuilding his bond with his son. But for Elena, his presence at these events felt like salt in a wound. How could he play the role of the perfect father when the cracks in their marriage were still so glaringly visible? One evening, after dropping Liam off at Mark's apartment for the weekend, Elena received an unexpected visitor, Kara. Her best friend had been a rock through the chaos, always ready with wine, snacks, and brutally honest advice. "All right," Kara said, barging into Elena's living room with a bottle of Merlot and 2 glasses. "It's time for some tough love." Elena raised an eyebrow. "What now?" "You," Kara began, pouring the wine, "are stuck. You've built this wall so high, no one, especially Mark, is going to break through it." Elena sighed. "I'm protecting myself, Kara and Liam." "I get that," Kara said, softening, "but you're also shutting yourself off from the possibility of healing. Whether that's with Mark or without him, I don't know. But you've got to decide, Elena." Elena stared at her wine glass, Kara's words swirling in her mind. Maybe her friend was right. She had been so focused on protecting herself that she hadn't considered what healing might look like. The pivotal moment came during Liam's school play, a light-hearted production of Peter Pan. The entire auditorium was packed with proud parents, their faces beaming as they snapped photos and cheered. Mark arrived early, securing a seat near the front. He waved when he spotted Elena entering, but she hesitated, unsure whether to sit next to him. In the end, she chose a spot a few rows back, where she could watch unnoticed. As the play unfolded, Elena couldn't help but feel a swell of pride as Liam delivered his lines flawlessly. But then came the final scene, a heartwarming reunion between Peter Pan and Wendy that seemed to strike a chord in Mark. She saw him wipe his eyes discreetly, his shoulders trembling slightly. In that moment, she realized something she hadn't expected. Mark was changing. Whether it was enough, she didn't know, but it was real. After the play, Liam ran to his parents, his face alight with joy. "Did you see me, Mom, Dad?" "You were amazing, buddy," Mark said, ruffling Liam's hair. Elena nodded, forcing a smile. "You were perfect." For a brief moment, the 3 of them stood together, and it almost felt normal. But the weight of their fractured family loomed large, casting a shadow over the fleeting moment of happiness. Just as Elena began to consider the possibility of moving forward, Sophia reappeared, this time with a legal threat. A formal letter arrived at Mark's apartment, accusing him of emotional manipulation and demanding financial compensation for damages. Elena only found out when Mark called her in a panic. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice laced with desperation. "She's threatening to go public with everything." Elena felt a mix of anger and dread. "Why are you telling me this, Mark? This is your mess." "I know," he said. "But if she drags this out, It's not just me who'll be affected. She could hurt Liam too. The thought of their son being caught in the crossfire was enough to make Elena's blood run cold. Despite her anger, she agreed to meet with Mark and his lawyer to discuss their options. The meeting was tense. To say the least, Mark's lawyer advised him to settle quietly, but Elena wasn't so sure. If you give her what she wants, what's stopping her from coming back for more? She argued. Mark looked at her, his expression conflicted. I don't want this to blow up, Elena, for Liam's sake. Elena leaned forward, her eyes blazing. Then fight for him. Mark, fight for us. Show me that you're willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. Her words seemed to light a fire in Mark. For the first time, he looked resolute. You're right, he said. I'm not letting her take any more from us. With his lawyer's guidance, Mark drafted a firm response, denying Sophia's claims and warning her against further action. The letter was sent, and for days, they waited anxiously for her reply. When it finally came, it was anticlimactic. Sophia backed down, her threats revealed to be empty. But the ordeal left both Mark and Elena exhausted, the strain of it all pushing them to their limits. The stress of the legal battle brought Elena to her breaking point one evening. After putting Liam to bed, she sat alone in the living room, staring at the framed family photo on the mantel. The image felt like a relic from another life, a life she wasn't sure she could ever get back. When Mark called later that night, she almost didn't answer, but something compelled her to pick up. Elena, he said, his voice soft. I know I've said this 100 times, but I'm sorry for everything. I know you are, she replied, her voice heavy with emotion. But sorry doesn't change what happened. No, it doesn't, Mark admitted. But I want to change for you, for Liam. Elena closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I don't know if I can forgive you, Mark. I don't know if I'll ever trust you again. You don't have to decide that now, he said, but please, don't give up on us. Over the next few weeks, Elena found herself softening. Just a little. Mark's actions began to speak louder than his words. He was patient, respectful, and consistent, showing her that he was truly committed to change. One afternoon, as they watched Liam play soccer, Elena caught Mark smiling at her out of the corner of her eye. For the first time in months, she smiled back. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you've been captivated by this story. Let me know in the comments if you believe in second chances or if some mistakes are unforgivable. It was a cloudy Saturday morning when Elena finally reached her breaking point. Months of tension had led to this day, a day she could no longer avoid the emotions she'd tried so hard to suppress. The morning began with a simple plan. Take Liam to the park, let him play, and enjoy a moment of peace. But peace, as Elena would soon discover, was far from her grasp. Mark had insisted on joining them, much to Elena's dismay. For Liam, he had said, his voice calm but insistent. She reluctantly agreed, but as they stood together near the swings, the awkward silence between them spoke volumes. Liam darted from the slide to the monkey bars, his laughter ringing out like a brief reprieve. For a moment, it seemed like everything might be okay, but then Elena spotted her. Sophia. She was standing near the entrance of the park, her sharp gaze locked on the three of them. Elena's heart sank. What is she doing here? Elena muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing. Mark followed her gaze, his face paling. I didn't tell her we'd be here, he said quickly, his tone defensive. Before Elena could respond, Sophia began walking toward them, her stride confident and deliberate. Liam, oblivious to the tension, ran up to her. Hi, do I know you? He asked with a curious smile. Elena's heart twisted. She moved quickly, placing herself between Liam and Sophia. Liam, go back to the swings, she said firmly. Sophia smirked, tilting her head. Relax, Elena. I'm just here to talk. Elena glared at her. You've done enough damage, leave. Mark stepped in, his tone a mix of panic and anger. Sophia, this isn't the time or place. Oh, but it is, Sophia shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You keep saying you want to fix things, Mark, but you're still pretending like this didn't happen, like I didn't happen. Liam, sensing the tension, stayed close to the swings, but kept glancing over Elena's chest, tightened as she realized just how much this moment could unravel everything she'd worked to protect. Elena's voice was cold and steady. You need to leave now. Sophia crossed her arms, her smirk fading. What are you so afraid of, Elena? The truth. Mark stepped forward, his voice firm. That's enough, Sophia. This isn't about you anymore. Oh, isn't it? Sophia snapped, her voice rising. You think you can just sweep this under the rug? Pretend it never happened. Newsflash, Mark. It did, and I'm not going to be ignored. People in the park began to notice the confrontation. Elena felt their eyes on her, their judgment like daggers. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. You've said your piece, Elena said, her voice low but resolute. Now leave. This is my family, and you don't belong here. Sophia's face twisted with anger, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed off, leaving behind an air of tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Mark turned to Elena, his face etched with guilt. I'm sorry I didn't. Not here, Elena cut him off. We'll talk later. That evening, after putting Liam to bed, Elena sat in the living room, her hands clenched into fists. Mark arrived shortly after, his expression a mix of exhaustion and regret. Why was she there? Elena demanded, her voice trembling with anger. I swear I didn't tell her, Mark said. She must have found out somehow. Elena stood, pacing the room. This is exactly why I can't trust you, Mark. No matter how much you say you've changed, she's always there, lurking, waiting to tear us apart. Mark's shoulders slumped. I'm doing everything I can to fix this, Elena. I don't know what else you want from me. I want her gone, Elena shouted, her voice breaking. I want to feel safe. I want to believe that you're not going to betray me again, but how can I, when she's still in the picture? Mark stepped closer, his voice soft but steady. I've cut all ties with her. I'm doing therapy. I'm showing up for Liam. I'm showing up for you, but you have to meet me halfway. Elena shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I can't, Mark, not yet. The next day, Mark showed up unexpectedly at Elena's house. He wasn't there to argue or defend himself, he was there to apologize. Elena, he began, his voice trembling. I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make up for, and I know I've given you every reason not to trust me, but I want you to know that I'm not giving up, not on you, not on Liam, and not on us. Elena looked at him, her walls starting to crack. Words are easy, Mark, actions are harder. I know, he said, nodding. That's why I'm here. I want to do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm worthy of your forgiveness. That evening, after Mark left, Elena found herself reflecting on his words. She didn't know if she could forgive him, but for the first time, she considered the possibility. The next week brought subtle changes. Mark continued to show up, not just for Liam, but for Elena. He fixed things around the house, helped with errands, and made an effort to communicate openly and honestly. Slowly, Elena began to see glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in months, there was a sliver of hope. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Let me know in the comments if you think forgiveness is possible, or if some wounds never truly heal. The days following Mark's heartfelt apology were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions for Elena. She wanted to believe in his sincerity, but the scars of his betrayal ran deep. As much as she saw him trying, helping with Liam, repairing their communication, she couldn't shake the lingering doubts that clung to her heart like shadows. But one thing was clear. Something had to give. The tension between them, the looming presence of Sophia, and the emotional toll on Liam were all building to a boiling point, and it was all about to come to a head in the most unexpected way. It was a quiet Friday evening when Elena received an anonymous email. The subject line sent a chill down her spine. The truth you deserve. Inside, there were several photos of Mark and Sophia together, candid shots that painted an intimate picture of their past affair. But what caught Elena's attention wasn't the content. It was the date stamps. One of the photos had been taken just 3 months before Mark confessed everything. It wasn't from the distant past, as he had claimed. This revelation felt like a dagger to her chest. Elena's hands shook as she scrolled through the photos. Her mind raced with questions. Had Mark lied about ending things with Sophia earlier than he admitted? Was their progress all a facade? Fueled by anger and betrayal, Elena called Mark. Her voice was sharp, each word laced with fury. I need you to come over now. Mark arrived at Elena's house within the hour, his face clouded with concern. What's going on? He asked as he stepped inside. Elena didn't waste time. She thrust her phone into his hands, the photos displayed on the screen. Explain this. Mark's face drained of color as he scrolled through the images. Elena, this isn't what it looks like, he said, his voice cracking. Then tell me what it is, she demanded, her arms crossed tightly. Because it looks like you lied to me again. Mark took a deep breath, his hands trembling. I didn't lie. These photos, they were taken before I confessed. I didn't know she had someone taking pictures, I swear. I ended things with her when I said I did. Elena's eyes narrowed. Do you have any idea how hard it is to believe you after everything? I know, Mark said, his voice desperate. I know I've given you every reason not to trust me, but I'm telling the truth this time, Elena. I'm done with her, completely. The raw emotion in his voice gave her pause. For a moment, she saw the man she had once trusted, the father of her child, but the pain of betrayal still weighed heavy on her heart. I need time, Elena said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. As the days passed, Elena threw herself into being there for Liam. She spent more time with him at the park, helping with his school projects, and doing anything to keep his world as stable as possible. But even Liam began to notice the cracks in their family. One evening, as Elena tucked him into bed, he asked a question that broke her heart. Mom, do you think Dad will come back home? Elena hesitated, her throat tightening. I don't know, sweetheart, but no matter what happens, both of us love you very much. Liam nodded, his eyes heavy with sleep. I just want us to be happy again. Elena kissed his forehead, tears stinging her eyes. Me too, buddy, me too. Mark, meanwhile, was determined to prove his sincerity. He began attending not just individual therapy, but also group sessions focused on rebuilding trust in relationships. He read books, took notes, and even reached out to Elena with plans for co-parenting that prioritized Liam's needs. One evening, he showed up unannounced at her house. I know I can't undo the past, he said, standing on her porch, but I want to show you I'm serious about changing, not just for you, but for Liam, for us. Elena sighed, her emotions a tangled mess. Mark, I see you trying, but it's not just about effort, it's about consistency time. I'll give you all the time you need, he said softly. I just want you to know, I'm not giving up. Just when it seemed like things might finally settle, Sophia made one last attempt to insert herself into their lives. This time, it wasn't through photos or legal threats, it was in person. Elena was at the grocery store when she saw Sophia in the parking lot. At first, she thought it was a coincidence, but the way Sophia walked directly toward her made it clear this was intentional. Elena, Sophia began, her tone mockingly sweet. I just wanted to clear the air. Mark may have promised you the world, but we both know he'll never change. Elena's anger flared, but she forced herself to stay calm. You're wasting your time, Sophia. Whatever you're trying to do, it's not going to work. Sophia smirked. We'll see about that. Elena didn't wait for more. She turned and walked away, her heart pounding with frustration and anger. The final confrontation came a week later, when Mark called Elena with urgency in his voice. "I need to see you. It's about Sophia." Elena agreed to meet him, though her nerves were on edge. They met at a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. "Sophia's been harassing me," Mark said, his tone serious. "She's been showing up at my apartment, leaving notes on my car. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to make things worse, but it's getting out of hand." Elena's heart sank. As much as she despised Sophia, she hadn't realized how far the woman was willing to go. "What are you going to do?" "I'm filing a restraining order," Mark said firmly. "For all our sakes, this ends now." For the first time, Elena saw a side of Mark that she hadn't seen in a long time, a man willing to stand up for his family, to protect them no matter the cost. That evening, as Elena reflected on everything that had happened, Mark showed up at her doorstep. His face was a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Elena," he said, his voice trembling, "I know I've made so many mistakes, but I need you to know that I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Not just for Liam, but for us." Elena stared at him, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. "I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were, Mark." "Maybe not," he said, "but we can try to build something new, something better." Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more gripping stories like this one. Let me know in the comments if you think Mark deserves a second chance, or if some betrayals are unforgivable. Elena sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone, her heart a tangle of emotions. The conversation with Mark had left her feeling raw, her doubts and fears colliding with the faintest glimmers of hope. But as she tried to sort through the chaos in her mind, an unexpected knock at the door shattered her focus. Sophia stood on the other side, her expression defiant, yet tinged with something Elena couldn't quite place: desperation. "Can we talk?" Sophia asked, her voice unusually subdued. Elena hesitated. The last thing she wanted was another confrontation, but curiosity got the better of her. She stepped aside, letting Sophia enter. "What do you want?" Elena's tone was sharp, her arms crossed defensively. Sophia sat at the edge of the couch, her posture uncharacteristically meek. "This isn't easy for me to say, but I need to clear the air. Mark filed a restraining order against me." Elena's eyes narrowed. "And you think I had something to do with that?" "No," Sophia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it made me realize. I've lost. He chose you, Elena. He always has. I kept hoping that he'd come back to me, but it's clear now that's never going to happen." Elena was taken aback. This was a side of Sophia she hadn't seen before, vulnerable, almost remorseful, but sympathy was a long way off. "I don't know what you're trying to accomplish here," Elena said, her voice steady, "but you've caused enough damage. It's time for you to move on." Sophia nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I know, and I will. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." Elena didn't respond, her emotions too tangled to form coherent words. She simply opened the door, signaling that the conversation was over. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Elena and Mark began to ease. Though the wounds were far from healed, they began attending co-parenting sessions together, focusing on Liam's needs and rebuilding trust, slowly, painfully, but steadily. One evening, during a quiet moment after Liam had gone to bed, Mark broke the silence. "Do you think there's any chance for us, Elena? Not just as co-parents, but as us?" Elena looked at him, her expression a mixture of sadness and uncertainty. "I don't know, Mark. I want to believe that we can rebuild something, but trust doesn't come back overnight." "I'll wait," Mark said softly, "as long as it takes." It was a rainy Saturday when Liam, ever the curious and perceptive child, asked a question that left both his parents speechless. "Why don't we all live together anymore?" he asked, his big, innocent eyes looking up at Elena and Mark as they sat with him during dinner. Elena froze, glancing at Mark for support. Mark cleared his throat, his voice gentle. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, buddy, and when that happens, it can take a while to fix things." "But you love each other, right?" Liam's question hung in the air, the weight of it pressing down on them both. Elena reached out, taking Liam's small hand in hers. "We both love you very much, Liam, and we're working hard to make sure you're happy and safe." It wasn't the answer Liam wanted, but it was the best they could give him for now. As their co-parenting sessions continued, Elena began to notice genuine change in Mark. He was more present, more honest, and more patient, but the lingering doubts in her heart kept her from fully letting her guard down. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, Elena turned to Mark. "I need to know one thing. If I give this a chance, if I try to rebuild what we had, will you promise me there will be no more lies?" Mark's gaze was unwavering. "I promise, Elena. No more lies ever." She nodded, her resolve firm. "Then we'll see. But you have to understand, Mark, this is your last chance." Just when it seemed like things might finally stabilize, Sophia made one final desperate move. Elena received a call from a mutual acquaintance, warning her that Sophia was planning to release the photos of her and Mark to the public. Elena felt a wave of anger and fear wash over her. She called Mark immediately, her voice trembling. "Sophia's not done. She's threatening to make everything public." Mark's response was immediate. "I'll handle it. I won't let her hurt you or Liam." That evening, Mark confronted Sophia one last time. The meeting was tense, filled with sharp words and painful truths. But by the end, Sophia agreed to back off for good, realizing that her actions were only driving Mark further away. The ordeal with Sophia forced Mark and Elena to confront their deepest fears and insecurities. Through countless conversations, moments of vulnerability, and shared efforts to protect Liam, they began to rediscover the foundation of their relationship. One evening, as they sat together on Elena's porch, watching Liam play in the yard, Mark turned to her. "Thank you for giving me the chance to fix this." Elena smiled faintly. "Thank you for proving that you're worth the chance." Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more gripping stories like this one. Let me know in the comments. Do you think trust can ever be fully rebuilt after betrayal? The sun was setting over the quiet neighborhood, casting a golden glow over Elena's porch as she sat next to Mark. They weren't holding hands, and the space between them felt deliberate, but there was a sense of peace that hadn't existed for a long time. Their journey, messy and painful, had brought them to this moment, one of understanding, if not complete resolution. The restraining order against Sophia had held, and for the first time in months, Mark and Elena could breathe, without the constant intrusion of drama. Sophia's final attempt to expose the photos had been thwarted when Mark and Elena, for the first time as a team, sent a firm legal warning through their lawyer. Mark had taken full responsibility for his mistakes in front of the co-parenting counselor, acknowledging the hurt he had caused and the long road ahead to earning back trust, not just from Elena, but from Liam as well. "Liam needs a father who keeps his promises," Mark had said during one session, his voice steady and resolved. "I'm going to be that father." For Elena, trust didn't return easily. The betrayal still lingered, like a faint bruise that hadn't quite healed. But watching Mark consistently show up for Liam, never missing a soccer practice, making time for bedtime stories, and even helping him build a school science project, softened the walls she had built around her heart. One evening, while cleaning up after dinner, Liam asked a question that made her pause. "Mom, do you think Dad will ever live with us again?" Elena crouched down to meet his gaze, her hands gently resting on his shoulders. "I don't know, sweetheart, but what I do know is that Dad and I are doing everything we can to make sure you're happy." Liam nodded thoughtfully. "I just like it when we're all together." Her chest tightened at his words, but they also gave her clarity. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Liam, his happiness, and giving him the stability he needed. Mark suggested a family trip to the beach, a neutral space where they could focus on being together without the weight of the past hanging over them. At first, Elena hesitated. It felt too soon, too risky, but Liam's excitement tipped the scales. The trip turned out to be exactly what they all needed. For a weekend, they left behind the tension and drama, allowing themselves to rediscover the simple joys of being a family. They built sandcastles, chased Liam through the waves, and shared stories around a small bonfire. That night, as Liam slept soundly in the hotel room, Mark and Elena sat on the balcony, watching the moonlight dance on the ocean. "Thank you for this," Elena said, her voice soft. Mark looked at her, his expression earnest. "Thank you for letting me be here." The turning point came weeks later. On a quiet Saturday morning, Mark had arrived early to pick Liam up for a day at the park. As he helped Liam tie his sneakers, Elena watched from the kitchen, her heart heavy with a mixture of gratitude and hesitation. "Mark," she said, after Liam ran off to grab his soccer ball, "I want to try. I don't know where this will lead, but I want to see if we can rebuild." Mark's eyes filled with emotion. "You don't know how much that means to me." "But," she added firmly, "this is for us to rebuild as a family. Not just you and me. Liam deserves this." He nodded, his voice steady. "I won't let you down." Sophia's departure from their lives was surprisingly anticlimactic. After receiving the legal warning and facing the reality that Mark had truly moved on, she seemed to vanish. Elena heard through mutual acquaintances that Sophia had left town, perhaps seeking a fresh start of her own. For Elena, it was a bittersweet relief. While she still harbored resentment, she also felt a twinge of pity for the woman who had caused so much chaos. Months later, Elena, Mark, and Liam had settled into a new routine. While Mark hadn't moved back in, he spent more time at the house, helping Liam with schoolwork or joining them for dinner. Their relationship wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt and tension. But they were learning to communicate in ways they never had before. Liam thrived in the newfound stability. His laughter returned, filling the house with a warmth Elena hadn't realized she missed so much. Watching him and Mark bond again gave her hope that, despite everything, they could create a new version of their family. For Elena, the journey had been as much about self-discovery as it was about rebuilding her family. She had learned to set boundaries, to advocate for herself, and to trust her instincts. While she wasn't ready to fully forgive Mark, she had come to see him as a man willing to change, not just for her, but for himself and Liam. Mark, too, had transformed. Therapy had helped him confront the insecurities and flaws that had led to his infidelity. He no longer avoided hard conversations or shied away from accountability. Instead, he faced each challenge with quiet determination, proving through actions rather than words that he was committed to being a better partner and father. On a sunny afternoon, Elena and Mark sat together at one of Liam's soccer games. As they cheered him on from the sidelines, Elena realized that, for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. "I'm proud of you," she said, glancing at Mark. He looked at her, his expression filled with gratitude. "I'm proud of us." The story didn't end with a perfect fairy tale reunion, but that was okay. Life, Elena had learned, wasn't about perfection. It was about growth, resilience, and the people who made the journey worth it. For Liam, the lessons were simple, yet profound: love, forgiveness, and the unshakable bond of family. And for Elena and Mark, the road ahead remained uncertain, but it was one they were willing to walk, one step at a time. And that's the end of this story. What do you think? Can trust really be rebuilt after betrayal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this one. Until next time, take care and keep believing in second chances.